History didn't forget this man. It replaced him. Every time a light switch flips across the world, his invention is used, but his name isn't. In living rooms, office towers, hospital corridors, the same quiet gesture happens millions of times a day. A hand reaches for a switch, the room obeys, and no one ever asks whose work made that obedience possible. You were shown the face of electric light, but not the hand that made it possible to live with. The posters gave you one image. The headlines gave you one name. The story was trimmed down until a global industry could be credited to a single mind in a single room. But the light that stays on through the night, the bulb that doesn't die after a few brief seconds, the systems that let entire cities trust the dark, those came from someone else's solutions. You've heard the legend of the man in the spotlight. This is the story of the man just outside its edge. If what you're about to hear were widely understood, every classroom poster of Edison and Bell would need to be redrawn, not to erase them, but to admit they were never alone. Because when history tells you that one man invented the light bulb, it hides two things at once: the system of people behind the patent and the system that decides whose names survive. This isn't about changing heroes. It's about seeing who was edited out to keep the story simple. Lewis Howard Latimer was born in 1848 in Massachusetts, not far from Boston, and not far from a law that said his parents were still property. His mother and father, Rebecca and George Latimer, had escaped enslavement in Virginia. For them, freedom meant a courtroom battle over whether a human being could be dragged back as someone's legal asset. Lewis grew up in that gap between the law on paper and the life he was allowed to live. There were no scholarships, no engineering programs waiting for him. So he did the one thing no one could legislate against. He taught himself. This is the part textbooks usually skip, the world he had to fight through just to get in the room. As a teenager, Latimer joined a Boston patent law firm, not as an engineer, as an office boy. From the back of that room, he watched other men's ideas turned into diagrams, filings, and legal claims. When the draftsman left, Latimer convinced his employer to give him a chance at the drawing board. He learned to translate invention into ink, to take messy sketches and turn them into the precise lines the law would recognize. This is where the story usually jumps straight to Edison, but Latimer was already learning the language that made ideas real: drafting patents. In that role, Latimer helped draft one of the most important patents of the 19th century, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. The device that would redefine distance needed to be defined on paper first. Latimer drew those lines. His name wasn't on the front page, but his work helped lock in the document that protected the idea. Again, the pattern is the same. Famous device, familiar name, invisible draftsman. When the light bulb enters most stories, it appears as a finished symbol, a glowing glass icon over Edison's head. But early incandescent bulbs had a problem. Their filaments burned out quickly, making them expensive and unreliable. Useful for demonstrations, not for daily life. Latimer focused on what seemed like a technical detail: the filament itself. He patented a new method for producing a carbon filament, a way to make it last longer, burn more steadily, and make the bulb practical for homes and streets. This is the part most textbooks compress into a single phrase: Edison improved the light bulb. They rarely tell you who made improved possible. Making a bulb that survived longer than a demonstration was only one step. Electric light needed an ecosystem: power stations, wiring schemes, distribution networks. Latimer worked not only on filaments, but on the broader problem of how light would reach actual people. He designed improvements in fixtures and installations. He oversaw lighting projects for streets and buildings. He even wrote one of the first technical manuals on electric lighting, explaining, in plain language, how this new technology worked and how to install it safely. That's the detail most textbooks skip. The man who didn't just improve the bulb, he helped teach the world how to use it. This is where the record splits. Edison's companies adopted Latimer's filament work and his expertise in electric lighting. Latimer joined the inner circle, the Edison Pioneers, the elite group credited with building the electrical age. In the official photo, he's right there, the only black man in the group. But when the story was simplified for classrooms and headlines, the team became a lone genius. This changes how the story is usually told, because without Latimer's filament and his system work, the light bulb stays more symbol than solution. So how does a man who helped make electric light practical, who drafted major patents, who wrote the guide to installing these systems, end up as a footnote, if he's mentioned at all? Part of the answer is structural. Business interests had every reason to promote a single, marketable figurehead. A lone genius is easier to brand than a collaborative network of engineers, drafters, and installers. Another part is the racial reality of the era. In a time when segregation and discrimination were written into law and practice, a black inventor could build the foundation of an industry and still never be placed at the center of its story. The work was absorbed. The name was not. Notice what changed. The technology was updated, but the list of people you were told to thank was not. Newspapers amplified the same pattern. They praised Edison's genius, his wizardry, his miracles of light, often without acknowledging the network beneath him. That repetition mattered. Over time, it hardened into what people called common knowledge. Today, every city skyline at night is a monument to a story that was simplified. That simplification has consequences. When children learn that one man invented the light bulb, they absorb more than a fact. They absorb an image of who invention belongs to. They see whose names are repeated and whose are optional. If the only version you ever heard made Latimer optional, what else might be missing from the stories you trust? Restoring Lewis Howard Latimer to the center of this history doesn't erase Edison. It corrects the scale. It shows that black expertise was not an exception at the margins, but a force woven into the core of modern technology. And it exposes how easy it is for systems of credit to leave people behind even after their work becomes indispensable. Every light that stays on long enough to be useful is part of the problem Latimer helped solve. Every network that carries power across a map echoes the systems he helped design and describe. The world we recognize as modern runs through decisions a man like him made, and then watched recede from public memory. So when you hear the familiar story, the lone inventor, the stroke of genius, the bulb flashing on above his head, remember the draftsman in the patent office, the engineer improving filaments, the writer of the manual, the only black man in the Edison Pioneers photograph. His name is not an alternate version. It's part of what actually happened. Every light in this frame still runs through a discovery you were never taught to name. Lewis Howard Latimer patented brightness, and history dimmed it.